today we have a special Things Hidden podcast in store for you. We have a theologian and someone who is the author of The Jesus Driven Life, someone I've gotten to know in person many years ago, and we're reuniting to get together today on our podcast. Michael Hardin, how you doing, sir?
Hey, David, good to see you again. Good to be here again. Fun, isn't it?
Yeah, and you've been very instrumental for a lot of folks understanding the theological implications of memetic theory and taking it into different directions and helping people integrate an anthropology as Girard developed in line with a theology, right? And ultimately, that's what you kind of encapsulated with your work, preaching peace, which was very instrumental for a lot of folks. A lot of disaffected evangelicals were drawn to your work.
Yes, yes, they were. Yeah,
And go
James
ahead.
Allison said, "I'm just doing for Protestantism what he's done for Catholicism with memetic theory."
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I guess Brad Jerzak's with Orthodoxy, right? So everyone's got their.
Yeah, we got him covered. That's right.
um, well, when you look at the scope of the different epochs of kind of how memetic theory has taken off, here we are in 2023. How do you assess the overall landscape of how things have continued in terms of the development of the ideas in academia, scholars, rogue scholars who are not in institution formally but are developing insights at a high level and bringing it to the public in the age of the internet, and as well as the general public's starting to kind of percolate in an understanding of memetic theory ever so slowly in recent years?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, it takes me, I would have to say, I missed the first decade of the Girard influence, the 1980 to 1990, as Renee's work is beginning to percolate, at least amongst the high level. I call them high level. They certainly think they're high level scholars that would eventuate in Bob Funk's West Star Institute. The John Dominic Crossan's and these types of folks. The West Star Institute brought Renee in, and they did not understand his approach at all, and he did not understand them at all. And out of that group grew two different organizations. The first one was the Jesus Seminar, which is very familiar to everybody. But the second is the Colloquium on Violence and Religion, which is the Girard group. I came to know Renee personally in 1990, and might have been 1989, but I think it was 1990. And so have been part of this now shift, several shifts, because in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s, it was all about theology and biblical studies. It shifted into cultural type things like psychoanalysis and literature, politics, film, economics, and different things. And then it became much more international. So the international areas, the South Americans got to bring in their particular themes, and the Italians their particular themes. And so the Australians also have a very, very vibrant Girardian community with Scott Cowdell leading that group. So it has really blossomed in many, many ways. The work, I could not begin to say enough about the work of Bill Johnson at Michigan State University Press, the editorial work he's done to bring this whole new canon of Girardian literature to us. I mean, I must have 70, 80 volumes now, and I remember when the whole project started a little over a decade ago, and now I'm just so impressed. When it comes to the Colloquium on Violence and Religion, I have personal situations with that community, so I have left them. What that organization is doing is not important to me. I think it's just a little bit of Girardian self-masturbation. But I am interested in writers like Tony Bartlett, Tony, who is reframing semiotics with my
Yeah, I just had him on to do one on Jonah and the sign of Jonah in his new
just
book. Yeah,
brilliant. Tony is
yeah,
a brilliant thinker, you know. Um, other than that, um, I don't really, other than reading the books that come out on Renee or something to do with mimetic theory, I'm really focused on pursuing it now in my own research and work and in the writing on the new book and all of this. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, I'll tell you
yeah.
that, and getting to know Renee for a quarter century. And I don't know if I ever told you, when I was doing my PhD dissertation on Girard and Bart, I planned it so that I could go spend 2 weeks in Renee's apartment in Paris and write the chapter on his thinking. I didn't have my bibliography with me, but I could do it out of my head. Just write this whole chapter there, sitting in his apartment, 1 block from the Eiffel Tower. It was brilliant. I had the best time.
Yeah. It seemed like when Renee passed away, it was at 2015, right?
Yes,
And all of a
November.
sudden, it seemed like I always joke. It seemed like God said, "Hey, go ahead and write the script for the next plots in the world stage, because we're gonna really hyper accelerate people's understanding of memetic theory and scapegoating." You know?
Well, and where does the Girardian canon end? It ends with Sheve Clausewitz.
Yeah, yeah,
The battling to the end.
right.
It opens up the possibilities of this very apocalypse we're in.
Yeah,
Um, I didn't, when I tended to think about any kind of coming apocalypse, I always had tied it to uh, the surface expressions of social mimetic behaviors and that are bad, mobs, this, that, wars, et cetera, rising crime rates, all that. And what I didn't realize is that it's if indeed religion undergirds culture, as the mimetic theory postulates, and I think the archaeology validates, it would also be true that the very thing that allows the human species to work together, that peace that's a medium of exchange, the transaction value in all relationships, that's the piece that had to finally be seen as the principalities and the powers. And so as I've dug through this, down through this, there was a great book by David Graeber called Debt, the First 5,000 Years. And I started just intellectually, my head was exploding, because if in fact the problem of human culture is religion, and we have all the phenomena there, but a big part of religion is debt. There's this God that you friggin' owe. You owe this God, right? Um, it seemed to me that the gospel got rid of that entirely. It blew that category right out of divinity.
yeah,
And really reopened up the category of what a gracious, loving, nonviolent, pacifistic God really does look like. And so I guess I was taken by surprise when I got thrown out of theology into economics back in 2017 because of a life change. And I had to read. I had to start learning about stuff I'd never wanted to learn about, ever. And I'm not surprised now to find out that in fact we're at the end of a major series of experiments. The first is the debt experiment that began 5,000 years ago. The second is the central bank experiment. Just today, the basket of currencies in the G7, the Swiss franc, the Japanese yen, Bank of Canada, US, they've all agreed now they're going to liquefy each other. I mean, the central banks they're just broken. Everything's broken, and there's so much happening in emerging new technologies, the job market. I mean, we're gonna watch 50% of the jobs out there vanish over the next 5 years. 50%. We're gonna watch robotics and AI come into our lives at the speed of a hurricane. And us older folks, that's going to be harder for us to adjust to, you know. And then the future generations, what do they have to contend with? All the ethical issues of what happens if you get a rogue AI. And we've already seen some of these early experiments, you know. I mean, you have Chat GPT, which is innocuous, but I don't know if you've seen the Apple, was it not the Apple, but the was it Google or Apple? I know the Google one thinks it's sentient, but one of them went crazy on
The
this one.
Microsoft one, yeah.
Microsoft one, yeah, tried to get her to leave her husband to have an affair. You know, it's like, okay, because at the bottom line is all AI is programmed by humans. The AI can only mimic the human, and the AI can never become an evolutionary step beyond the human unless the AI was absolutely committed to pacifism, healing, compassion, and we know that's not going to happen. So we are about to commit the technological sin. We're going to create a double of ourselves outside of ourselves. And that I'm not kidding you when I say things like the Matrix or the Terminator. These aren't just Jules Verne scenarios. You know, these are now real world possibilities.
Yeah, it's like I think that this virtual world that they're trying to create is it's like I call it pseudo Gnosticism, because it's based on a materialistic worldview, but they have to create kind of a false sense of transcendence away from the material world in this AI and virtual reality and everything like that. Like they need the spirit, so it has to come out in some way, and they manufacture it with this, you know.
Yeah, well, that's the metaverse, or the futureverse. They're called both metaverse, futureverse. The fascinating thing about that is, think about this, David. Once you start wiping out jobs, okay, now life is no longer about grow up, go to a good school, get a good job, move up through the system. That doesn't happen anymore, right? So we're going to be reverting to universal basic income.
Yeah.
And this is where CBDCs that are programmable come in, and people will have their rent paid, minimum amount of food, minimum amount of utilities, you know, and they'll be plugged into the internet with their Google goggles.
Yeah, the internet's going to turn off when they're reading inappropriate content, like Michael Hardin's YouTube videos, right? It's
Right.
gonna,
That's
your
right.
allotted internet is down for today, you know.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So they're gonna live their life, they're gonna get their value, they're gonna derive their meaning from who they are in the metaverse and the future version. This is already happening with gamers, you
Yeah,
know. And I think as the metaverse becomes more and more realistic, I have seen some metaverses that are extremely realistic, and I mean, and some that are fantasy, gorgeous, beautiful, realistic. It's just like, I'd like to go there, you know. Well, I
yeah,
can now with my, you know, and the money that's going to be pouring into that for developers and app creators and everything else is going to be massive. But I think they need a way to pacify what's left of the population. And they're going to do that by keeping people in their Googleverse all day. People come out and wake up, they go in their Googleverse, you know, and maybe they even take a leak in the toilet while they're in their Googleverse because nobody knows, and you know, but they have to take them off to cook and eat, so maybe they cook something fast. And I don't know. I just see this as a decimation of the human species at the same time that we're programming robotics and AI together to do all kinds of human functions,
yeah.
so they'll be out there doing everything. It's just, to me, the world that's coming after this, I don't, it feels like a twisted science fiction thriller.
Now, so that's a great entry point into some more memetic analysis of how we got here. You know, Peter Thiel was famous for saying that, you know, we were promised flying cars and all we got was 140 characters. You know, for the idea was is that the 1950s and 60s
Yeah.
sci-fi envisioned a world in which by the 2000s we'd be having these beautiful flying cars and cures for everything, and all we got was these social media apps like Twitter. Now he says, you know, these developments in bits are a kind of distraction from the decay around us. We sit on our special apps to numb us out to the reality that our subways are falling down because, you know, their infrastructure is falling apart. It's all basically been frozen in time. since the era when we still believe that we could progress. Now, I believe there's something to do with anthropology being missing from the Christian approach to the gospel, which also corresponds with a disembodied deity, a perversion of Jesus that removes the incarnational action element of the gospel that corresponds with where we're at. Meaning, if we were teaching incarnational Christianity, if we were teaching an anthropologically grounded Christianity, we wouldn't have abandoned the world of atoms for bits. We would have innovated in the world of atoms in correspondence with the world of bits, and therefore we would have that harmony of body and soul integrated into how we progress. But we believe that we were at the end of the history with the discovery of the atom bomb. So physics became this rarefied holy of holies that we couldn't touch anymore. And we all kind of like let it be frozen in time. And the physics theories that we enshrined at that time of the atom bomb ended up kind of getting us in a place where we were stuck in a rut. And I think that Christians, our vocation should be to incarnate innovations in the world of atoms again, such that instead of saying that innovation is just a matter of bits and virtual reality and AI, which is kind of like, again, that pseudo-Gnosticism that we're all plagued in right now, we should be saying, we're going to cure cancer. We're going to cure diabetes. We're going to create energy too cheap to meter. We're going to have anti-gravity. We're not going to be stuck with this zero-sum mentality. We're going to create a post-scarcity type economy with material things and with our health. I know that's a lot, but I know you can help me understand this.
Well, I've taken some notes. So, okay, so let's deal with the origins of the problem of American Protestant Christianity's lack of an anthropology. That's because it's primarily Gnostic. And Philip Lee's book, Against the Protestant Gnostics, has detailed how both the conservative and the liberal traditions in America had the same identical set of Gnostic presuppositions and were battling for them. The battle's been for that. And so there is no incarnation in the conservative tradition because the conservative tradition can't do ethics. It can only do holiness codes. And there is no ability for the left to do ethics. All they can do are litmus tests because they have separated the incarnation from discipleship. You can't talk about the incarnation of Jesus without talking about his life, his lifestyle, his character, his person, not just simply ontologically in Greek and Latin terms, but in real life relational terms. Who is this Jesus Christ that comes and relates to us? How did he relate? What was he about? And that means a lot of hard work. I mean, for me, it's meant 50 years of hard work, you know, and but I would say that if we're going to talk about incarnation, we do it also in the same breath as discipleship. So like in the last book I did, Knowing God, I argued that after I did my critique of modern Christianity, the first major chapter is crucifixion. And I say, here's how we have to start. This is the anthropological starting point. And then I went to resurrection, ascension, the mediatorial Christ, and then I came to incarnation, church discipleship, and spirit in the same chapter, because incarnation is not just about Jesus. It's about us as well as his body, his continued incarnation in the world through us by the Spirit. So you can't separate discipleship from that. The Orthodox tradition does, the Catholic tradition does, the Protestant tradition does. The very heartbeat of early Christianity is not some pseudo-doctrinal unity. That's a myth. That is just a complete myth. The New Testament itself is a powerful witness to the fact that we have two very different and decided streams of how we're going to relate Jesus to Judaism. You know, you have the Mark and Luke and Paul and Johannine stream and a little Hebrews in there. And then you've got the Matthean, James, Peter, Jude stream in there. And the point of that is that there's this theological disunity in the early church, but there was an ethical unity that ran across the board through the apostolic tradition and the heretical Christian tradition. And that was a commitment to nonviolence, a commitment to pacifism. These early Christians understood, because they had to spend a year in a catechumenate where they were learning the basics: love your neighbor as yourself, do good as you have them do unto you, forgive 70 times 7. They're learning to do all of these things, and they have this mentor, and they're working through this new paradigm of relationality that is compassionate and generous and shows off the character of the God that is being worshiped. And then they make the decision to live this life permanently. They become baptized and members of the body. But that point of that ethical substratum, that commitment to test the waters and do it for a year or 2 or 3, and this is what's completely missing, right? And the Anabaptists, they tried to bring that back with their, let's go to the Sermon on the Mount kind of thing, and you have your the right throws the Sermon on the Mount out. The left reads it through a Marxist lens. And so when it comes to the texts about forgiveness and mercy, well, that's not for us, And so if you want to know where atoms to be recreated, atoms are to be recreated, but in the ethical self, in the space between us, we recreate our relationship. And in recreating a relationship, we're recreating ourselves. We're literally recreating our brain patterns, our brain waves. The atoms are changing, Um, so for me, if I'm going to talk about bringing together the bit and the atom, I'm going to say the bit would only function as an introduction to get the atoms together.
Yeah,
it would
like
not
that.
be the
Yeah, I like
mediator
that.
between them. It wouldn't be the mediator. Although in this case, look, we're being mediated with bits,
Right.
right, and software. So it's just code, and that's cool. But it's not standing there between us, and we're not looking at it going, oh my God, it's mediating. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's underneath. So I guess in that sense, it's working.
I just have kind of like an optimistic eschatology. I still believe that Jesus is winning in history. And I think that the clever ways in which victimism is alive and well is a sign that the Satan, the accuser, is on the run. And that even though we are unleashing into rivalries like never before, I just see all of this as a growing pain process.
I'm okay. So I'm 100% with you. You've seen the Neil Howell Williams Strauss book, The Fourth Turning.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in this last decade of fourth turning, and then there's going to be a first turning, and there's going to be songwriters and poets, and it'll be like the 60s again, and there'll be new innovation and people thinking new dreams after whatever chaos we're going to come out of. I totally agree with that. I'm absolutely convinced that Jesus is victor, as Bart would say, in and through and above and of history. My sense is that my hope is that the next Jesus revolution that's going to happen, and it will happen, it has to start somewhere. But I'm hoping that it does not begin inside of American Protestantism. Because the sacrificial God that has been around for tens of thousands of years in our heads, right? This sacrificial God is going down. And in the first place, this sacrificial God, the best place, the easiest place to take that God down is Christianity and the cross of Jesus. That's where you take down that sacrificial God. That's where you show that all your God concepts, every last one of them, is Janus-faced. And in order for the Satan to be brought down, it has to be cast out of divinity. It has to be cast out of your theology. It has to be placed in your anthropology, and we're starting to do that. You're starting to see it a little bit. The problem we're going to have right now is that the right has a very, very medieval superstitious view of the Satan, and the left have that identical view, except they reject that. And so they have no category or way to talk about evil except in Marxist language.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem with the left. They have lost the capacity to use the language of the West about uh, the ethical life. They've lost that. And so we've ended up in their postmodern nihilism, where everybody and everything is a he, she, it, they, she, them, us. I don't know what to call people anymore. I don't know, what part of the alphabet are you from? It's no longer what country are you from, but what alphabet letter do you identify with?
But isn't that just a classic example of hyper
Oh,
undifferentiation that takes place? Yeah.
it's exactly what has to happen. It's going to happen, and it's going to get worse and worse.
But the
And
difference is that it's, instead of it being carnival, a little period before sacrifice in the ancient world, it is now every day is a carnival. Every day is carnival, and now it's consecrated as the new normal. And if you're not participating in that carnival, then you're off with your head. That's the new rule.
well,
Seems like.
and I am nervous about America coming up through the next election. Um, I will say this. Although I am very anti-Donald Trump, I'm not anti-Donald Trump, the politician that understands that he he was David, it's Goliath, but he just didn't have the right aim or something. I agreed with his approach to foreign policy. I did not like his character. I don't like the lies. I don't like, he doesn't need any of that. He doesn't need any, if he's going to go into battle against these principalities and powers, he doesn't need any of that. But I'm very disturbed about him, and very concerned about America coming up to the 2024 elections. I hope the Republican Party finds its better angels and offers an alternative.
But the ironic thing about that is that all the ones who talk nicer than Trump are more dead set on neocon bloodshed and murder. So you
Well,
get you
this
get
is the hard part,
crosstalk.
isn't it? You do. It's terrible, right?
So
It is.
do you want the thuggish language of Trump's rhetoric, but the less hawkish foreign policy? I'll take the less hawkish foreign policy and crude language with Trump over all those neocons like Nikki Haley, who would say, Michael Hardin, you are exactly right. This course talk is so foul. It's time for a new time of togetherness. Bomb Iran,
That's right. Bomb,
Uh,
bomb, 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 around. Yeah. But I have to caveat this. I want people to understand that my criticism of Trump is his personality, his just his character. Okay. Um, he represents, from my perspective, an interesting double. On the one hand, he's the last best hope for patriotic Americans. On the other hand, he's the Antichrist, as far as the left is concerned. And so I quit criticizing Trump on my Facebook page when I realized that when the time came and Trump was going to start becoming scapegoated, I didn't want to be participating in that. So I've really stopped my talk about Trump. I've said my piece about him, and if I ever met him, I would tell him, the things that I appreciated about him and the things that I didn't, and why I'm sorry I couldn't vote for you. But hell, I can't vote for Joe Biden either. I mean, and the Libertarian Party has made some great strides in the last 20 years, but America is not built to be a three-party system, not yet. We may have to break down even further before we can figure out a way to do this thing, because we'd have to rewrite the rules of the Senate and the House. I mean, it would be crazy. But we're moving into a first turning in about a decade. I hope I'm still alive to see it. I would like to see the next Beatles.
yeah. I think I mean, as we're recording this, this is Monday, the 20th, and tomorrow, Donald Trump had said last week that the 21st, Tuesday, he's expected to be arrested. So,
Arrested. Yeah.
regardless of what you think about the man's personality, this is a big historic moment for the American civic religion. And it's, because what I see happening is the American Trump movement is kind of like they're holding on to the classic civic religion of, patriotism and
Correct.
meritocracy and all this. And then you have this new one, which the Pentagon is fully involved in, CIA, which is this patchwork of BLM and wokeism. And it's
Yeah.
saying this is the new civic religion. We're throwing out the other one by force. If you cling to
Right.
that old civic religion, you're now the heretic. And anybody who's associated with it, we're going to make life miserable for you. So you better just submit to the new religion of victimism. And so Trump represents a kind of, this is a symbolic moment. So let's say theoretically, Michael Hardin is brought in to be the chaplain as Trump is arrested and he's put into his jail cell tomorrow. What are you saying to him in this moment with those big picture ideas as well as, the moment of
If
history?
such a possibility existed, and I would sit down and I'd say, "Sir, are you willing to listen?" And he'd either say yes or no. And I'd say, "May I be as blunt and frank with you as you have been with the American people?" And he'd either say yes or no. And I would say, "Here's your situation. You're being set up to be a global fall guy, not just a US fall guy, but a global fall guy. The world's going to need somebody to blame for its woes, and America's going to need someone to blame." And I would say, you know as well as anybody that you are having a hard time raising money. I would say, "Sir, Zero Hedge reported," Zero Hedge, you know Zero Hedge, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Zero Hedge reported this morning that 85% of Republicans said they wouldn't bother protesting. He doesn't have that kind of an audience anymore that's willing to go to bat for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say what you need to do is you need to focus on getting yourself out of the news, you need to lay low, motherfucker, because otherwise you're going to be it. And the thing is it would fail, just like it failed with Saddam Hussein, just like it failed with Osama bin Laden,
Gaddafi.
Gaddafi, yeah,
Yeah,
thank you. And his only mistake was trying to transform the currency system a little early and make it honest.
yeah.
But yeah, it's I think they're setting him. I think, or it just feels to me like he's being set up that way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm.
But the scary thing for me though is that because, like you would say in your work, that the scapegoat mechanism has been broken by Christ,
Mhm.
any type of failed big scapegoating event like that will only result in more chaos as a result, right?
Well,
Because a
that's
failed
precisely
sacrifice
right.
results in
That's it.
chaos.
That's precisely right. And it did well. Look at it. Didn't work after the Desert Storm War.
Yeah.
Didn't work after 9/11. I mean, it hasn't worked. It's really been broken since the Holocaust. The Holocaust busted the back of that thing wide open, and the revelation of how brutal we were as a species. I mean, that was even today. I mean, the last great scapegoat of the world is Hitler.
Right.
Hitler is sui generis. You can't compare anybody to him. He's in a category all his own. He's been completely divinized. But we're in such a far reach from that
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
It's time for another one. It could be Putin. There's reasons you could say Putin could end up, being the one that everybody said was the problem. Especially if he decides to go nuclear or anything like that.
But the problem is the majority of the world's population would see him as more of the good guy in this case right now. China, India,
Okay.
Russia.
Well, look, I don't know. Z and Putin are getting together because they're part of the BRICS.
Yeah.
And they want to do that whole new currency thing together. But I think Z would turn. if the whole rest of the world, if you know, if there is a nuclear conflict over there, I can see China turning. I can see India turning. The whole European Union definitely turn. The entire West will turn. Japan will turn. Australia. I mean, India. I mean, because everybody's terrified of nuclear weapons. So
Yeah.
I think you could have that event be something that coalesces the globe against, and then we got our next scapegoat, and we can go on for another 50, 75 years, right?
Yeah. But it's going to be even less stable than the World War II era, the post World War II era I think we're living in the conclusion of that mythic era of post World War II, world order. And you see it because this conflict is the grandchildren of the World War II era in Ukraine and Russia right now arguing over who is the inheritor of the throne of Satan, Hitler, right? And you have the Russians are saying, no, you guys are literally embracing in your Western Ukrainian government, Stepan Bandera, who is a known Nazi collaborator. You've got Nazi insignias all over your material. You guys are the inheritor of Satan. And then the West is saying, no, there you go, Putin. You're just like Hitler invading a country. You're Hitler. You're Satan. And so they can't agree. They're trying to determine. It's like the grandchildren. This is the bookend of the post World War II era. The grandchildren are now saying, let's play act again. And it's live action role playing, only people are really dying, and nukes are on the table,
Yeah, but we can take this back 2 degrees further. The first is there's a wonderful book by Pankaj Mishra called Age of Anger. And he details how our modern conflict can be traced back to the conflict between Rousseau and Voltaire about how to promote the Enlightenment, either by violence or not. And the second part of that is that we're not just at the end of we're at the end of the very short period of time in human history where the West has had power. I mean, if you want to say the West had, say, power from the 13th century, 14th century was when the West begins this ascendancy, right? Before that, it's all about the East. And it's all going back to the East. All the wealth is going back to the East. It's the Eastern central banks that are buying gold at a pace not seen in 50 years. It's technology that's going to the East because of regulation, restrictions, and taxations in the more NATO type countries. I mean, we're losing a lot. I mean, look at Mexico is going to join the BRICS. Mm-hmm. Now, what happens when it comes time for us to need some corn because our corn supply got decimated by a famine and we've been buying from Mexico for 50 years, and all of a sudden the Chinese say, no, we want that corn. Mm-hmm. So there's so many variables right now. I feel like I'm crossing stepping stones in a river that are moving. And life has a tenuousness to it right now that I've not known. And I do try to do a little bit of kind of evaluating my feelings and emotions as we're going through this, because I know I can't be the only human being that has these emotions, I'm concerned that we are being lied to on such a scale right now by governments, churches, religious institutions, media outlets of all sorts. The amount of lying that's occurring is also another phenomenon that's, I think, related to you have to have this amount of lying in order to start a myth, right? Which is a pure lie. It's the collective lie. And I think we're going to get set up for that somehow. And so whoever this next scapegoat is, I don't want to be participating in their scapegoating. I would want to try and help people see you might think he's guilty. He's random, man. This one works. We'll use this one, If not Trump, then Putin. If not Putin, then Macron.
Exactly. I mean, and it is random in the sense that nobody with a straight face who's been paying attention could tell you, you know, that whatever they try to throw up at Trump for criminality, there's never been anything like that Bill or Hillary Clinton did or Joe Biden. I
Oh,
mean, come
look,
on.
we all know now. We
Yeah,
all know now about the presidential sexcapades for the
yeah,
last 200 years, right?
yeah,
We know how poorly some of them ran in their office. We know the bribery and scandals, the Teapot Dome scandal, the Harding administration, right? That was a big one right there at the time
yeah.
before the crash of the economy. So,
Yes,
I
yes,
mean, now what do we got? We got Hunter Biden and the Chinese deals with the Biden family, and of course, you got, as you mentioned, with the Clintons. I don't. I'll be honest with you, and this is me speaking my mind. I don't think the Obamas were involved in those kinds of deals. I think they understood that if they're going to make their money, they're going to make their money through books, engagements, and speaking deals because they're both excellent speakers.
yeah.
You know.
And they also did a lot for the war machine, so they were taken care of as long as they kept their nose clean, so to
Well,
speak. You know what I mean?
yeah, I've since found out that Obama was very, very much against the use of drones.
Hmm.
Very much against the use of drones. But it was seen as a better alternative to lose a piece of equipment than to lose soldiers' lives that made the evening
Mhm,
news.
mhm. True.
So again,
Yeah.
pick your poison, right?
Right. Well, you mentioned something earlier. You said that this evil is coming back, and we don't know how to explain it. You said the conservatives have a medieval view of diabolical forces. When I went through my learning of memetic theory through the years, I went through a phase where I said, well, I guess, because, there's different ways of reading Girard because he's got his earlier ideas and gets his later ideas. He's a little more conservative and walks some stuff back because he wanted to be and he wanted to defer to Catholic dogma whenever there was something that his work could be interpreted as running afoul of some of those bigger questions. And some people criticize him for that because they like the more radical younger voices, and you could explain that better. But my point is I went through a phase where I said, okay, well, I guess I agree that there is no like demonic spirit entity. It's just a memetic human STD type event that's taking place when someone's possessed. But I don't know. I've been interviewing a lot of exorcists lately, and when you hear these stories with multiple corroborations of people levitating off the ground, speaking foreign languages they've never heard, I just have a hard time being so cynical that I say, "Oh, all those priests are just lying or delusional." I think
Oh,
there is something there going on.
well, there is a spirit world. Okay. That spirit world manifests itself as chaos, and it manifests itself as order. It manifests itself as chaos in human beings who internalize multiple voices, a multiplicity of voices that they hear as as an other in their head, and they have to obey and thus self-harm. They've internalized the collective voice. There is the social phenomenon of the mob as well, right? Um, but there is also the philosophical slash theological side where we create structures of thinking that inculcate this, that allow us to do precisely what we shouldn't do, which is to internalize other voices, but we're taught to do that. And then we have our structures, our bureaucratic structures, which derive all bureaucratic structures derive from ritual. And so we have like institutions, like insurance companies that have every regulation in place possible to deny you your claim that you've been paying faithfully into. You've been paying into this system, right? And that's a satanic mechanism. So it manifests itself in organizations, organizational structures, uh, yeah, but it also manifests at that very where the psyche and the spirit do connect. It can manifest there too. I've seen it too.
So you do believe in the reality of real spirits that are evil. They're not just mimetic social phenomenon between humans.
They are mimetic social phenomenon between humans, but they are also evil and they can be internalized.
Mm-hmm.
They can also be cast out.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not divine. They weren't created by God. They're not fallen angels. None of that Enoch myth stuff. The demonic is our spirituality gone rogue and dark.
Mm-hmm.
Our human religious, the thing that really makes us human, the homo religiosus.
Yeah. So when you see the cases, and again, we're just assuming that these are true, but when you hear the cases of the priests saying they're levitating off the ground, they're walking up the ground, how do you assess that as a mimetic theorist and a theologian? Do you
Well,
just say that's not true, they're delusional, or
no,
yeah.
I don't know if you're aware that I've spent 20 years in a Native American shamanic tradition, I have a book called Walking with Grandfather that talks about the first 8 years or so of that training. I have seen and done things that I did not know were possible. I've been invisible. I've had people walk right next to me and not see me.
It's just being in New York City.
No. I mean, I've got some pretty cool stories, but the point is that the shamanic part of my life allows me to have an anthropology that is not disconnected from the spirit world or the world of energy, and it's holistic. And it does have, the nice thing is that it does have a clear and distinct abyss between the creator and the creation, which also the Judeo-Christian tradition has. The creation is not somehow an extension of the creator. They are distinct things. But no, for most people, a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist would probably be as close to a modern exorcist as you're going to find. But there are always going to be those cases where the voices that internalized are so twisted and have, how do you say? Okay, so negativity attracts negativity. Okay. Positivity, but negativity attracts negativity. If a person goes through a series of crises in their life, boom, 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 right? It's not just because that's the way the dice were rolled. It's because negativity attracts negativity. And when that happens in the world of spirit, what ends up is the goal of the spirit world is to scare the living shit out of you, to turn you into Father Damien or whatever the priest's name was at the end of The Exorcist, whose only last resort is to take the demon in himself and jump out the window, right? Rule number one in shamanism: you don't take disease into yourself and you don't take demons into yourself. That's the wrong way to do it, right? But all that phantasmagoria, it's just to scare you. It's just to get you off of your game, because the fact is, the demon has no power over those who are committed to nonviolence and pacifism. I pointed out to my students in Luke 10, the disciples are told, don't take a staff, don't take a purse, don't take extra sandals, don't take a cloak, don't take a sword, don't take nothing. Just go out and do this mission and cast out demons. They came back, we casted out demons, right? And then later on in Luke 10, there's that story that they tell Jesus, we brought our child to your disciples, but they couldn't cast the demon out of him. Well, why? Because what do you think they did first thing they got back, man? They grabbed their purse, put their sword on, and said, "Whoo, let's go to McDonald's." They weren't the sword. Once that sword goes back on, once that purse goes back on, once you are compromised with culture, you're powerless over the dark side.
Yeah.
So if in order to here's the thing, you don't conquer darkness with violence. That's the first thing. That's Satan battling Satan. And so when I mean, to me, this is where modern exorcism feels a little phony. It's the priest standing there, I adjure you, I adjure you. One adjuration should be enough to get that thing gone. If you have power, you don't need to be sloshing the holy water and, doing all. No, you walk in there as a child, a representative, an ambassador of the king. And you say, you are not welcome in our world. Leave. Go to the outer darkness where there's your judgment, Jack. It's just done. It's done because there's authority.
Yeah. I was listening to the book Hostage to the Devil by Father Malachi Martin. You remember that famous book in the 1970s?
Oh, Lord, yeah.
But he talks about like the first possession, Marianne, this girl, she's talking about marriage to non-being. And I said, this is very Girardian, when you think about Satan being the absence of being. So we dismiss it, but if you listen to it, there's a lot of Girardian insights that he's recounting from these possession stories,
Well, absolutely. The same with Freud's hysteria stories. They're all the same, right? You had real, honest to God, sexual abuse going on in late 19th century Vienna, proper Vienna. Freud understood that's what was really going on. And as soon as he started to say, this is what it is, he was shut down. And so he develops the Oedipal theory. Oh, well, we'll figure out another way to explain it.
Yeah. With all this that we've kind of touched on about our times today, I originally wanted to talk to you about this idea of keeping faith. And you had done a recent YouTube or Facebook video of, I think it was a segment from your private class, right? Where you were talking about pistis, the root word that we get for, the Greek word for faith that we see in the New Testament. And we've kind of painted a lot of noise and darkness and rumors of wars and scapegoats and all this stuff. And now we kind of get to land the plane with that, that word faith.
Good news and some gospel here, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I wanted to start writing my systematic theology, right? Except I realized if I'm going to be truly honest about it, I don't have a particular method. I have a number of methodologies I use. So I called it my unsystematic theology. But really, I wanted to tackle all the major doctrines of Protestantism. But the first 9 months of talks I did, weekly talks, were just kind of clearing the field. I was trying to take students through the history of various disciplines in the New Testament and periods of church history. And, I have a whole lecture. I think one of my best lectures in there is on Marcion. But at the very beginning of the project, I realized I had to start. I wanted to make 2 points. The first was that pistis, which is the Greek noun for that we translate into English as faith, is quite different in its lexicographical orientation than fides, the Roman word fides, which we also translate faith. And that the English term faith, as it's commonly used, has far more in common with the Roman notion of belief in, whereas the Greek notion has to do with fidelity, trustworthiness, or trust. And so I started on a project of just going through and looking at all the Pauline texts and translated them as rectification through trust. How do I know I'm rectified by the Father? I trust it. He said it. I believe it. I trust it. I trust it. Right?
It sounds like the fundamentalist, though. God said it. I believe it. That settles it.
But at that point, what I'm also trusting is this narrative which has no Deus ex machina in it, because I've been told about Jesus who dies. There was no Deus ex machina God there, right? So I can eliminate all the other gods. So this, who am I trusting? Well, first thing is, I don't trust God. I don't have a God concept. I trust the Father. I trust that I am loved by the Father, and I only know transcendence as the Father. I don't know transcendence as God. I know transcendence as the Father. And God concepts are the problem, because the Father is not like all the other gods. All gods, all human gods, without exception, are born from within the matrix of this blood mechanism, human sacrifice. And as a result, we've tossed our twinningness into divinity, good, bad, yin, yang. I mean, Zoroaster was the first one that did it, kind of on an official basis, and then later you'd have Plato doing it philosophically, and boom, 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 we just start. Okay, but only the gospel shows us that at the heart of the universe, that which structures reality, that logos, that structuring principle of reality, is self-giving love. And it is this self-giving love that in the character of the Father that Jesus of Nazareth imitates in his life, and whose life we are called to literally imitate. That is built into what it means to follow Jesus. Akaluthein, to follow, is no different than the use of mimesis in Paul. And this business of imitating and following is what creates true divinization. The divinization that the Orthodox want to speak of as something spiritual or ethereal or transcendent. No, it's ethical. It's ethical. Learning to love, that's hard. Learning to forgive 70 times 7, that's hard. Learning to be merciful and compassionate, and I mean, every day has its challenges. Sufficient unto today are the evils thereof. These are all hard things, but they do reflect the divine life. We do learn obedience through suffering. We are called to suffer. We are called to be the ones with whom the violence stops. We do not retaliate. All this anger is coming at me, boom, it just stops here. And I can forgive you because I know you don't know what you're doing. That's a beautiful way to separate action from intention, right? Our whole modern judicial system is built on correlating them. Well, we just separate them, and now we're in gospel.
So that's what trust is. That's what faith is. When we talk about, I've heard some Calvinists, even like Peter Lightheart, who's interested in Girard to some degree, and Douglas Wilson have said it should be rendered, when it says faith in Christ, it should be the faithfulness of Christ.
Oh, I'm absolutely of that persuasion in that debate, the pistis tu Christu debate. Yes.
Yeah.
It is the fidelity. It's Jesus' faithfulness that I trust. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I do come down on that side of the debate, because if you say faith in, now you're in the concept of fides.
A belief, right?
Yeah. Yes, which makes, and that makes belief an intellectual process, not a relational one. Once you turn faith into an intellectual process, now you've got the Western problem of the relationship of faith to reason. But if faith is a relational category, I trust you, David, because you've proven trustworthy to me. Right?
Yeah.
And I trust our relationship. We've watched, we've watched where our rivers connected, and our rivers went apart again, and now they're connecting again for a season, and you know how life is, and yet it's been a good relationship.
Yeah. And it's that relationality that is the heart of faith, right?
Of trust. of trust.
When how does that fit in with that passage that I think is in Mark where Jesus says, when you pray, pray as if believe as if it's already happened and it shall be done unto you. What
Yeah,
does that mean?
trust.
Trust that it's
When
already
you,
happened?
yes, yes, yes. When you pray, just trust that the Father hears your prayers.
Uh-huh.
If you're praying and you're hoping God hears your prayers, you're not praying. You're bouncing words off ceilings.
Yeah.
You're not praying. Or if you pray and you're just in this desperation mode or wish mode, that's not prayer.
Yeah. Does that mean that is there something true to those people that believe in that name it, claim it stuff? I know they go ridiculousness in
No,
that.
well, okay. So again,
There's a ridiculous way, but is there something root true to what they're saying?
there are certain elements of what they are wanting to communicate that are true. But they have turned it into superstition and Gnosticism. And so if it doesn't work for everybody, it wasn't meant for everybody. So we're looking for a way to talk about life, spirituality, theology, philosophy, politics, economics in a way that works for everybody.
Right.
That's holistic, that's integral in that Ken Wilber kind of sense.
Are they kind of tapping into something related to like neuroplasticity and the idea of,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. You
And
change
does
your
that not
brain.
work for everybody? Doesn't it work for everybody
It can.
to some degree, right? If you have a
Yeah,
community that believes
absolutely.
it, right?
Yeah, I stand in front of the mirror every morning and go, you're good looking, you're good looking. But by the end of the day, I'm sitting there going, you're ugly. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's what that's what I like about having these kind of conversations is that we can chew the fish and spit out the bones of all these different facets of the body of Christ and find, the redemptive elements about some
Oh,
of the
I'll
things
tell
they're
you, the
saying.
Christian tradition is a rich, rich feast. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. And it's sad. It's sad that somebody creates this fantastic feast and then somebody, whoever you want to blame, whatever, came along and just put like the cheapest thin gravy on everything that was meant to be delicate and delicious and wonderful, and
Yeah.
it's that
Yeah.
sacrificial covering it. But hey, we're in a time where it's getting uncovered, and that is such good news, and that's the benefit of Renee's work and then the work that we're doing, and then the work those after us will be doing, because they'll be able to see even farther standing
Yeah.
on our shoulders.
Do you see the future of the church? Does it look like this? I know this is kind of, you can paint in a lot of different brushes here, but I mean, broad brushes that don't get accuracy. But when I think about like these debates about, well, where's the church going to go? What's it going to look like? And I look at the institutional, the big ones like the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church talking about the keys of the kingdom and who has the keys of the kingdom. And it reminds me of that movie, Dude, Where's My Car? Who has the keys to the car? Who's driving the car of the future of Christianity? What's it look like? What do you
Well, look
see?
at it. So worst case scenario, the church is completely virtualized. I have the ability to sit here at home and put you and 5,000 other people in an auditorium. I've got AI generated human looking praise singers, and I've asked my chat GPT to write me some praise music a la Hillsong, and it does. And then either I ask it to help me write a sermon or something, but I create church online, and you all come, and to get in the door cost you a little small piece of some kind of crypto, and that's going to be church in the future, worst case scenario. Okay. It depends on how fast people get tired of living in a virtual reality and almost in a 1948-ish fashion feel the need to get away, sneak away to be together, away from technology, away from the electronics that are. I mean, now, they literally can monitor your biorhythms as you're walking through an airport, to see if you're dangerous. I mean, the technology is advancing so fast. We think facial recognition is big. Oh man, the technology for surveillance is so far ahead. And Yeah, and again, I'm most worried about sentient AI, because sentient AI is just this whole history of human thought. I hope somebody put a Bible in there somewhere.
Well, Michael Hardin, I really appreciate your time, and sir, it's always great to hear your thoughts and your wealth of knowledge. And I appreciate you bringing these ideas, like these lost thoughts. I mean, most people still to this day believe faith is a synonym for, mental assent or belief about something, and that misses the point
Yes.
fundamentally about what God is up to. So, thank you.
You're welcome, David. It's been very, very fun. I hope to do it again sometime with you.
Very good. Now, preaching, you have the Jesus Driven Life, and you said 9 other books before we started recording.
Yeah,
What's the best way to get that on Amazon or?
Amazon. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And
And
what's the new book title? Do you have a title?
it's tentatively titled Enter the Dragon, and the subtitle after the Bruce Lee film, and it's subtitled Christian Discipleship in an Age of Crisis.
Very good. And is that going to be your systematic
No,
theology?
no, no, no.
Okay.
That's just a little short. It's almost a primer I'm trying to write for regular folks. I'm trying to be like C.S. Lewis now. I'm trying to get out of the academic stuff and write for the regular guy.
Yeah. That's what N.T. Wright does. He has those smaller books and then the big
Yeah,
books, that,
yeah.
that works.
But I would like here, as I can move toward retirement or into retirement more fully, I would like to write my unsystematic theology. But right now I'm videotaping the lectures, and so if I leave nothing else behind, I still have that legacy.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.